Is it fair to say that without this US shale boom we've seen the last decade, wouldn't we be in a big energy crisis with the declining natural gas and oil production? Because US has been the leader. Basically, US and to a smaller degree Canada has, when it comes to oil at least, has been, you know, they have increased the exports of oil and production, I would say, in the world. While Saudi Arabia, Russia, and most of the others oil producers have been either flat or in decline. So let's start with for people to understand how important it is to look at the shale oil boom and what you are actually have looked at lately, you know, the development in this sector, what's raising a big concern when it comes to energy supply.
Right. And so for those of us that are old enough to remember, about 20 years ago, there was a big concern about something that was called peak oil. And some people even talked about peak oil and natural gas. And the reason for that was that the world had reached a level of production where we just weren't increasing our supply of oil or natural gas, that basically we would discover new fields, sometimes giant new fields, but because of the life cycle aspect of getting these fields developed, a lot of them were offshore and very difficult environments. By the time we actually had first oil, it was averaging like 8 years from discovery to first oil. And by the time we started these new discoveries producing, old fields had depleted. So we were getting nowhere. Production, oil and gas production was flat. At that time, renewables were not really very much of a factor, and the population of the planet kept growing. And so any intelligent person, particularly investors, were saying, wow, we have a big problem. We need more energy, and we're just not able to increase our energy supply, or at least we haven't so far. And so then shale came along. And by the way, it was made possible mostly by higher energy prices. I mean, that's sort of the way it works, that oil prices got very high in 2006, 7, 8, and they dropped a little bit during the global financial crisis in 2008 and 9, but by 2010, 11, oil prices were averaging $90 a barrel, and in the money of the day in the US at least, and they stayed at those very high levels until 2014. And so it was that sustained high price of oil and natural gas that made things like shale and oil sands in Canada possible. We've known about them for decades. I mean, this was nothing new. It's not like we woke up one day and said, oh my gosh, we could produce oil from shale. No, we always knew those things were there. They just weren't commercial. So, and for sure, we optimized some of the technologies to get them out of the ground, but none of that was very new either. I mean, we've been fracking wells since the 1860s in the United States. We use nitroglycerin and much more primitive methods, but none of these concepts are new. So all of the growth in global oil and natural gas liquids, which is included in the way that international energy organizations define oil, all of the growth in the last 15 years is from mostly, as you said, Johan, U.S. shale. And so without U.S. tight oil and shale gas, we would be in the same situation as we were in the early 2000s, only worse, which is to say that oil prices would be, who knows, $120, $150 a barrel. And that would be a huge problem for the global economy and for all of our standards of living. So that's what shale has done for us. And what the work that I'm doing suggests is not that that's over, but we're at the beginning of the end of that increased supply that kind of saved us 15 years ago. So we're going back to a place in which peak oil fears began 15 years ago. And an optimist would say, oh, well, Yeah, but there's a lot more shale in the world. It's not just in the United States and Canada, and so no problem. And we can discuss that if you like. But my professional opinion is that's really not true. There are a few bright spots in the world, mostly in the Middle East, where there is potential for additional oil and gas from shale, but it's relatively limited opportunity. So that's why shale is so important.